What is up, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of Grant Teach Me Something. We are super fortunate here to have a mega beast in the industry here in the studio. I know a lot of you guys are interested in notes, especially with the seller financing we talk about. And today we're going to talk to a guy who's responsible for $3 billion worth of notes in the industry and really revolutionizing notes into the space that we know that it is today. So stick around. When we get back, we're going to be talking to the wonderful Mr. Eddie Speed.
Teach me something.
Welcome back in, everybody. Eddie Speed, nice to have you here.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you guys. This is a really, really big treat for us here because, like I said in the intro, the note space that you know today, the way that notes work right now, truly, really was revolutionized and created by the guy sitting right here to my right, Mr. Eddie Speed. And we've had so many people follow in his footsteps and so many people who now only know note space as it is, but don't know that it was created by somebody that we've got right here still doing the business. So I'm super excited about talking about that. And what I'd like to jump into in kind of that space, I mean, let's just talk a little bit about your experience and kind of where things started. I mentioned in the intro, you and your team are responsible for $3.5 billion worth of notes. And just as a quick aside, I like to always point this out. 1 million seconds is 11 days. Do you know how long 1 billion seconds is? Have I asked you this before?
No.
1 million seconds is 11 days. How long do you think 1 billion seconds is?
It's a bunch.
32 years.
Wow.
So that's the difference between 1 million and 1 billion. And this guy's done 3.5 billion with a B in notes with him and his team. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in this and how this shaped, how you were able to kind of shape things together with you and your associates.
It was by accident. I started in 1980. I was 20 years old. And my father-in-law, who was not my father-in-law at the time, and his partner were in the seller finance note buying business in Mississippi. That's where this accent came from, right? And so they introduced me into the business, and I basically served an apprenticeship. So I just kind of went to work with them. I didn't know anything. I was clueless, and started with them. Did that for a couple of years. Martha, and my wife, and I married, who you know.
Mm-hmm. She's a wonderful lady.
36 years later.
You lucked out on that one.
Yep. Yeah, no kidding. 36 years later.
That's cool.
You know, we've been married and we've been living here in Dallas-Fort Worth. So we moved to Dallas to go in the note business. Mm-hmm. And in the note business in the early 80s, it was really just buying notes from individuals that seller finance their properties because of high interest rates, right? Traditional mortgage rates were 18, 20%. So they seller finance because they could make that mortgage 10 or 12 and make it an affordable payment. So that's how it all kind of started. And then by the late 80s, I started...
And actually, can I interrupt you real quick? So I just want to point out here something that we blew past. That a lot of guys who are getting into this industry in this last few years, several years, you know, sometimes I'll have people balk because we charge 9.5% interest rates, 9.5, 9.9 interest rates on our seller financing deals. And they're like, gosh, that's exorbitant. Why are you charging... How much did you say that the normal interest rate was?
Traditional mortgage rates in 1980, prime reached 21%.
21%. 21%.
So seller financing was brought into the industry in bulk, so to speak, because to solve an industry problem. Seller financing has always solved one industry problem, and that is seller financing fills the gap conventional lending doesn't fill. Right?
It's a great way
Sometimes
to put it.
That's been a big gap, sometimes it's been a smaller gap, but that's really always been kind of the purpose, right? Anyway, then there were guys that would sell like land tracts, like to put manufactured housing on. You know, they do subdivisions, and you see these subdivisions where there'd be, you know, a lot of houses, mobile homes on these houses or manufactured homes. A lot of times the developer would carry the paper on the land. In the, you know, the industry, the manufactured housing industry would finance the house. I bought 12, 15,000 notes like that.
Okay.
Okay. Then there was the real estate investors, right? And the real estate investor would seller finance a house, and the problem is there wasn't really an efficiency in the market. Most of the big institutional investors subsidiary of Bank America called Finance America. Kind of was a 900-pound gorilla. There was a company up in Washington State called Metropolitan. They were owned by an insurance company. So those were kind of the industry giants in the 80s. And they weren't, a real estate investor couldn't go sell their loans to that type of investor.
Because they wanted to buy huge amounts, right?
They were scared of the real estate investor, to be honest with you. They were scared that they were buying something, the house wasn't really repaired. It was kind of, the instance of fraud they thought would be a lot higher. That's the truth.
Yeah.
And so they were scared of that market. And so I really kind of softened up the edges because I had a trusted relationship with these guys. They knew that I had a long track record of delivering real paper that would pay and it wasn't bogus. And I started saying, hey, there's guys that do this, more than one at a time, they're doing it as a commercial business, that you could really do this. And it took a little while to get that in motion.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, and that's and the fact that you were able to have these conversations with these 900-pound gorillas and kind of shift that market over is just huge. I mean, we've seen the benefits from that, for years and years to come. When would you say it was, and I know this will be kind of hard to kind of pinpoint, but when would you say it was that you kind of saw the bucket tip and started really to where the note space was modeled as it is now? Like, about when was it? Was it early 90s that it kind of started turning around with the associates and that kind of thing? And
yeah, so probably through the 80s, I would say I bought 50 portfolios of notes.
Okay.
That were,
and what was an average size of these portfolios?
That portfolio size was probably 40 notes.
Okay.
So that was 2,000 notes, right? I mean, that's nothing compared to what we've done. I've closed 1,000 portfolios of seller finance notes today.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can think in terms of, we didn't move the bar very much.
Sure.
So in the 80s, I met a guy that was a real estate investor. He and his brother were partners, and he was a Dallas-Fort Worth guy. And I bought some notes from them. Their last name was D'Angelo.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Ken and John D'Angelo.
Yeah.
They owned a company called Rainbow Realty. Right. Now, if you weren't in Dallas-Fort Worth in the 80s and you didn't know a lot of real estate investors, Ken D'Angelo later founded a company that some of you have heard of called Homevestors.
Never heard of.
So that's
how we buy ugly houses. Those guys, you see the UGG, the caveman. That's a franchise. The franchise is behind the company behind that is called Homevestors.
Yeah.
Huge guys.
So the guy that founded it was my long friend. And I bought notes from him in the 80s, and then he wanted to franchise this thing, and he came to me and says, look, I don't really think this will really work well unless my franchisees know how to create a seller finance note, and then they know they can sell that note immediately. And so I was a good customer of a company that was growing to be the 900-pound gorilla in the note business that bought out another consumer finance company, and that company was a Dallas-based company called The Associates. So they had a division that bought seller finance notes, and I had a good trusted relationship with them. And I had lunch with those guys because we officed around the same area. I had lunch with them fairly often, and I sat down with them and I said, look, this could work. And they're like, Eddie, we've not bought notes from real estate investors over and over and over. There's kind of a security issue we're concerned about. And I said, look, let me introduce you to the guy and the story and the vetting, and let's see if there's a deal. And so he and I started out, and they said, okay, cautiously said, we'll look, right? I knew I could convince them
Sure.
because I knew it was vettable.
Right.
Right. So we started out we went to Walmart, and we bought 6 whiteboards and 6 easels. And every Saturday morning for probably about 2 months, we started out whiteboarding out essentially the formula of 6 different categories of creating a note that we knew that note was immediately saleable in the secondary market to somebody like the Associates. Nobody had ever done it.
Yeah.
And so Associates was doing, let's just say, about $75 million worth of business a year. I landed the Homevestor relationship with them. It went through me. We vetted the whole process. A year and a half later, They wake up and they go from 75 million a year to 200 million a year.
I like that number, which is more. I'll take the place of Ryan today, who normally.
And real estate investors, the old school guys, some of which you learn from and otherwise, right? All of a sudden, there was a definable secondary market that if you created good notes, you could sell the notes. And so we essentially kind of commercialized the business. And you know, it's kind of like a Bible story, right?
Yeah.
You know, Moses didn't actually know the sea was going to part. You know that? Okay. So
Just really hoping this thing works. We kind of need it.
yeah. So it's kind of like that. I look back and think it sounds like a kind of a cool story, but honestly, you know, I think at my core, I've just always been an entrepreneur, and if you have a vision and you know the concerns of the parties, and you know you can overcome the concerns, at some point you just got to charge up the hill and make it work.
Well, and I want to talk about that for a second, because that's an awesome point to discuss. So one of the things that we've talked about on these Grant Teach Me Something episodes is traction and how to really build our business. This isn't a hobby. This isn't a way for us to just like, I think too many real estate investors get in and say, oh, well, I'm going to be a real estate investor, and don't appreciate that as a real estate investor, we're building a business. We are doing it, you know. And you hit a word right there that I think will resonate with the folks that we've been preaching so hard on, which is vision. Your vision. You had a vision and you had to push that out. Now in Traction, it talks about visionaries and integrators and how to build your accountability chart and that kind of thing. And we've gone through that in some detail. If you're curious about that, look back on how to build your business. We got an episode called How to Build Your Business that talks about this kind of stuff. But Eddie's a great example of a visionary, right? You saw where this market could go.
Yeah.
And did you get here alone?
Well, no, because to be a visionary, my world is surrounded with implementers.
Yeah.
Right? And so, you know, I just want you to know these implementers will hold you back. Because they want to talk about a system and a process, and so you've been around my implementers, my executive level implementers, and yes, there's a balance, but somebody has to be that guy that has a vision. And I got to go, you know, we later did this with a whole lot more than Homevestors, but Ken sadly passed away many years ago, but Ken was just a great guy. And they used to, the joke was that when I would go to their office, they would have these little whiteboards, you know, the little whiteboards, and you could write on it. And I will forget one day, they wrote "No Star Wars," and they walked around like Vanna White around the conference room because Eddie and Ken were in there and they were saying "No Star Wars" today. Because we could sit around there and start dreaming of stuff you could do.
That's funny.
But yeah, we started out with, there's a basic philosophy that was true, right? Associates was willing to buy these loans if they were vetted and underwritten to a standard.
Okay.
Associates' whole experience was that a real estate investor would show up, right, with a loan file that was about that thick.
Yeah.
Almost nothing.
Right.
Right. They
had money to get me down. Why wouldn't I sell
exactly.
it to them?
They didn't vet their credit. They didn't vet their income. They didn't vet the paperwork. The paperwork wasn't homogenous, right?
Right.
It didn't look like a bank loan file.
Right.
So when I started out, the very first thing I told Ken is I said, look, it's got to look, smell, and taste like a traditional mortgage, right? And so we developed essentially what was a matrix. Now, I know this sounds really simple today. Who couldn't figure out an underwriting box, right?
Right.
Well, I don't know, somehow in 1991 and 2 when I was doing this, nobody had ever done it.
Well, and that's one of the cool things, and I don't know, there's got to be some kind of word for this. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of the, you know, gosh, I've never been able to come up with a great analogy, but think about, I'm a guitar player, right? So this will be the analogy I use. You know, we've got guys that came out like Jimmy Page, right? Jimmy Page is this, phenomenally famous, revolutionized music. He was sloppy. He was the sloppiest player. He honestly was not that great. But because of the way that he revolutionized what was happening, people were able to stand on that, and that all of a sudden became a baseline. Yeah. And then the next generation became better and better and better and better and better. And so raising that baseline is the hardest step of
Yeah.
getting anything to happen. And you kind of skipped straight through to step 4 on that, where it's like, look, there is no baseline. This is what we need as a baseline.
Yeah.
Let's make this our baseline for underwriting, and then we know that we've got good paper.
That's why we started out with a whiteboard. That's why we started out and saying, what's a good loan?
Right.
Right? And what do these investors want, and why do they want it? And once we did that, everything changed. So then I'm sure this wasn't Ken's plan, but it was reality. We taught the world how to do it.
Yeah.
Right? You were around a whole different set of non-home investor guys that all talked about those days, right?
Absolutely.
That kind of taught you how to do it. And the reality is at some point, then we kind of wrote the book. The book got copied, just reality.
as it
Just
happens,
reality,
yeah.
right? I wrote a book, and after 10 or 11 years of telling my story over and over and over and over, I wrote that book in 2003. It was called Streetwise Seller Financing. That was what launched me essentially into the training business.
That's great.
So it was just the story of
Yeah.
what we'd lived every day. And once again, now I wasn't smart like you were. You're really smart at scaling things and like documenting a process and whatever. And I tell you this offline all the time. I think
I
you're
appreciate
super skilled at that. I'm now pretty good at it, but I wasn't good at it then.
Humble. Yeah,
Right?
being
I was
humble.
like a anvil and a hammer guy.
Yeah.
Just beat it out the deal and structure it and stuff, which on the other side is a lot of what I teach is creative.
Right.
Right? And so I get to use things that I learned now over 39 years
Right.
and say, oh, you could structure it this way, or you could do this, or you could do that. And you and I have had some fun beating up things.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
oh yeah, Grant, well, what about this? And do
Yeah.
So
Crazy different
those are
ways to
things
think
I'm
about
good
stuff.
at. But once again, there's a balance, and particularly teaching somebody new, and that is you got to
Absolutely.
have some cornerstones to follow.
And so for those of you watching too, that's a very valuable thing to take away from this too, because so many of us, kind of going back to the same thing that I'm talking about of creating our business but not treating it like a business, so many of us, when we get in, we're just the hammer and an anvil, right?
Yeah.
But you have to, if you want to scale, you have to kind of step back for a second. Don't impede your progress by doing this, but look at it in bigger terms. Think bigger, right? We're going to take a break here in a second, and then when we get back, though, what I want to start doing is let's talk about really so we've talked about kind of the history, but from your perspective, I want to know, what is note buying, right? Let's just
Okay.
make it as simple as that. Like, what is a note purchase? How can somebody get involved in note purchasing for their own portfolio? And maybe we're going to talk, well, I say maybe, I know we are. We're going to talk about a couple of really cool things that you're not going to hear from anybody else. You're not going to hear from these guys that are note buyers when they're really just brokering notes to somebody else that's the note buyer. You're not going to hear some of the cool stuff that you're able to do. So stick around. Make sure to think of some questions, because we are going to get questions at the end of this from both YouTube, Facebook, anybody that's watching. Please, if you think of something, pop it in. Now's your chance to talk to a guy who's just an absolute beast in the industry. So on the other side of the break, we'll be talking about some of the note space, and I look forward to seeing you guys there. So now that we've kind of learned some of the history of where things are, and the fact that this note space that we know it today was really shifted and molded, not to that kind of as a tangent, we don't really appreciate a lot of times as guys that are in the industry today. Mortgages didn't even start until the 30s.
Yeah.
This is a fairly young industry in
Yeah.
the grand scheme of things.
Yep.
All of it is. Traditional mortgages is what I'm talking about when I say started in, was it 30s or 20s? I think it was the 30s, right?
I think it's
that
right,
the traditional
yeah.
mortgage started. So we've seen these things kind of shape, and the cool position that we're in right now is that we have that ability to stand on the backs of these giants that know the industry inside and out like nobody else does, and also add some new perspectives to some of the new technologies that are coming out, some of the new abilities that we have, some of the
Yep.
new restrictions that we have that require us to think somewhat out of the box. But in order to do that, we need to know where we're coming from, right? So Eddie, I'd love to hear you just kind of explain, in and as brief but still detailed as possible, is what is note purchasing and how does this work for somebody that might be watching? How can they add notes to their portfolio?
Okay, it is called the note buying business or the note business because the customer that owes the money signs a note, right? Now, we've all signed a note because if you've ever signed a check, you signed a note. Now, that's not an installment note with interest secured by real estate, but it is a note, right? So all of us have signed a note because when you make out a check, that is what it is.
Well, we say all of us. How many people? I'd like comment if you have never signed a check before.
All right, well, if you haven't, go get a checking account. Just enjoy the experience, okay? So, and of course, obviously, if you've signed a car note, or you bought a house, you signed the promise to pay is the note, right? Now, to make it real estate secured, so a real estate note will have like what we'll say is the principal amount. All that simply means is what you owe, the debt that you owe. It'll have an interest rate sometimes, right? It doesn't have
Depending
to have an
on
interest rate.
how
Legally have
good
to have
of a
an
negotiator you are.
Exactly. It'll have a payment. We typically think in terms of a monthly payment, right? And it'll have a payout term, a maturity date, an amortization term, right? Meaning how long it pays out over. So to surround that note, then you have the scenario of, is it real estate secured? Okay? And that is what most people in America would refer to as their mortgage, which is just in legal terms, it is the document that secures it by real estate. Half the states use a mortgage, half the states use, like Texas, half the states use another document that is not technically called a mortgage, it's called a deed of trust. In California, they call it a trust deed. Okay? Now, that's as deep as I'm gonna get.
Okay.
We typically have been called discount note buyers.
Okay.
Okay? So everybody, I think most everybody, understands the concept of a discounted note. We just don't realize that we understand it. Because we've all seen, particularly like people that work at factories or people that work in certain industries, they may not necessarily have a checking account or they don't go to the bank on Friday. They get their payroll check and there's this little portable truck that's sitting right outside the factory, and what's that called? A check cashing service. Or you can go to a physical location and go to a check cashing service. Hand them a $1,000 check and they give you $900. Hand them a $1,000 check and they give you $850, right? That they took your $1,000 note and paid less than the full amount owed. Although they can turn around and deposit that check in the bank and get the full $1,000. That is a discounted note. So we buy loans at a discount, but we're entitled to legally collect the full amount owed. That's the discount note business.
Which is what allows you to get the yields that you're requiring for the internal side, right? Like, because when you're looking at a note and you're analyzing that note, you might say, I want to get, and I'll just throw a round number out, right? I want to get a 15% yield out of my money. I want my money on the market to make me 15%. But the note that Gold Grant created with his seller financed buyer might be at 9.5%, right?
There's two different classes of people that carry seller finance notes. Two different sources, let's say, maybe not classes, doesn't sound quite right. One of them is just an individual mom and pop that seller financed a property. The average interest rate we see on that hovers right around 4%. So they write it at below bank interest rates.
And there's a golden nugget for you right there. How many notes do you say that you analyze?
We price about 3,000 one-off notes a year.
Okay. So pricing about 3,000 one-off notes a year. This is a great bit of information for you guys to know. It'll set up for something I'm sure we'll talk about here in a second when we're talking about buying on terms. Repeat that again, just so people really understand the severity of that. You said how much?
Mom and pop, not you, not a sophisticated real estate investor, but mom and pop, seller finance property, the average interest rate hovers right around 4%.
Which means that there's a lot of people selling their notes to you, selling their houses to you on a note. If you're going to average 4%, well, what's that obviously mean?
Yep.
It's a lot of people that are selling it for less than 4%, right?
The average mom and pop that's willing to sell or finance, the conditions they're willing to agree to, their average real estate investor has no perspective of how good of a deal they can negotiate.
Right. Absolutely.
And
And we've had that conversation before.
Yeah.
Eddie hammers me because of some of the terms that I buy on, which I think are great. And then he's like, well, yeah, but have you thought about this and have you thought about this and what your overall... And I just kind of have to... Have y'all ever seen you remember, maybe I'm dating myself now, but cassette tapes? Remember the Maxwell cassette tapes and the picture of the guy on the front of it that does this?
Grandfather used?
That's kind of the view that it can be when you talk to somebody like this. You start looking at, you get all the information. But I just really want you guys to take that away because so many of you that are watching right now are buying houses directly from the seller, right? When you're buying houses directly from the seller, that is mom and pop. And mom and pop is willing to give you a note for far less than 4%. It averages that 4% mark. So what I want you guys to do is tag somebody in the comments right now. Tag somebody that you know that is in this industry who's buying houses, especially wholesalers, especially people who think that they can only make cash offers. And let them understand that, hey, there is a way here. If you've got a partner or somebody that you think might be interested in the notes, there is a way here to buy these. And I want you to understand that 4% is the average from mom and pop. Okay, so now that we've digressed that far, let you get back into it. But you've priced all these out.
We'll circle back on that because there's a lot to say about creative financing and getting the seller to carry terms that a lot of people don't think they would do. Right.
If you don't ask, you don't get. That's my number one phrase, right?
So in the 80s, most everybody that was a note flipper, brokered notes, as I did, I'd done 40,000 of them, were just guys that were buying individual notes, and they created these kind of unbelievable terms, unbelievable as in not good, and we would negotiate and buy their loan at a discount. We'd have to adjust the discount based on the collateral and the buyer and the interest rate and how long they carried it and all that stuff, right? So it made us be really creative.
Yeah.
But that creativity now turned out to be my advantage, right? Because I've seen all this stuff. The only advantage, I'm not smarter than you, dude. I can assure you that. I have seen 300,000 or 400,000 more notes than you have.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
All I have to,
which is more. Thanks, Ryan.
all I have to do is have a good memory.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of crazy stuff and how people structured it. And so then it made me realize, it's kind of like the 4-minute mile thing, right? Once you know you can break it, you can break it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I look at it. So discounted notes, and people say, how much is a note discount? Now you are an architect at knowing how to structure a note that can be sold for top dollar, right? Because you know the bank's criteria,
right?
And you back into the bank's criteria,
and we underwrite to high, to high heaven. We've got all of the details that I always preach to you guys. And this is actually here. Now I can get somebody who's actually in the industry to back me up in that and say, when I talk about how important it is to follow these Dodd-Frank regulations, to go through an RMLO, even if you don't hit. Because a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, I haven't done the 5, so I don't need to do my underwriting package through an RMLO. And I say, do it no matter how much, because if you're going to sell that note on the secondary market, what kind of discount difference are you going to take if you do not have an underwriting package versus if you went through an RMLO, did the proper underwriting channels?
20 to 35% difference.
That's a lot of money, guys.
I was on the phone yesterday with a long friend of mine, a guy in far South Texas named Scott Campbell. Now, you may not know who Scott Campbell is, but the truth of the matter is, they've done between 30 and 35,000 owner finance notes. 30 to 35,000. Okay? And he told me on the phone yesterday, he says, Eddie, the whole Dodd-Frank and the RMLO scenario means that we own a lot better portfolio than we owned before we ever were required to do it. So that discipline that is required by law does have a great benefit.
I've never hated Dodd-Frank. I think Dodd-Frank does a great job in consumer protection and making sure that investors are doing the right thing and putting good paper out on the market. There's certain things about it that I'd like to see shifted or changed, but as a whole.
Well, so if you read the book in 2000 that I wrote in 2003 called Streetwise Seller Financing, guess what it talked about?
having a good underwriting package.
Exactly.
And that was before the Dodd-Frank regulations. And actually, I'm glad that you brought that together, because I was going to point that out when you were talking about telling the associates how to make an underwriting box.
Yep.
That vision of saying, hey, this is what's necessary for good paper, before anybody else kind of popped in and regulated that, gave you that leg up to say that you were going to have better paper than anybody else. That's one of the things that we need to do. I'm a big believer in, because like, y'all know me, I read the laws. I actually go out and check and make sure that everything, because the laws tell us how we can do things, and they create, what do they say? The mother of all invention is necessity. They create this necessity. They create these boundaries that we have to work between. And sometimes the boundary that gets thrown out there can spark an idea that says, oh, wait a minute. We can do something cool this way.
Well, I mean, look at how my whole world started in the note space, right? I mean, there was a real estate investor who did everything really well, except they did not understand the secondary market of notes. And so he came to me because that was my space. Right? And I was credible with the guys that were buying these notes. And I just said, okay, I'm going to bridge their concern with the paper that we can create. And all of a sudden, now we've got communication.
It's brilliant.
It wasn't brilliant. It was, I look back and think, I was wandering through the woods, just an entrepreneur trying to do more business. I don't want to act like I was some brilliant cat. I was just.
But how many of you are out there that could say that same thing right now? Comment right now. Comment if you're that guy or that girl that's sitting there saying, look, I'm an entrepreneur with a vision, trying to make business happen. Let us know, because you are sitting in the seat that this guy who's done $3.5 billion was in several years ago.
So I'm gonna jump on you. Okay? That was the whole dynamic of seller financing with a purpose. Not seller financing accidentally, seller financing intentionally with a purpose. The way you advertise, the way you market for people, all of those things are you and I are 100% on the same page on. I mean, 100%, right? I was doing it before you were doing it, but you certainly have implemented it well. Okay?
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
And I really respect you for that. No kidding.
Thank you. Yeah, that's huge.
Now let's talk about the other side.
Yeah.
Which is the hot thing of fix and flipper, a wholesaler, or whatever, and something that I think frustrates you and I, right? And that is mediocrity. The mediocrity of saying, I'm willing to accept a 5% success rate when I'm buying houses. Because you're making 20 offers with one wholesale deal being accepted, and there's 19 people that your offer ends up in the trash can.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, this is my slogan for CreativeCashFlow.com is we help you buy more houses. And that is why, there. Because so many people, they've made their buy box so small. And don't get me wrong, it's good to have focus, right?
Yeah.
It's good to have focus and to know what you're good at and what you're not. But guys, you're throwing away so many good opportunities. And one of the things I always tell people, especially wholesalers that I'm talking to about, because we can convert leads that are trash deals for you, you could pay for your marketing campaign out of your trash can.
Exactly. What does a lead cost? $100?
For the
150
phone call?
bucks?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Now, there's going to be people that are listening and they go, oh no, I went to a seminar and we're doing bandit signs that are below the stop sign, and that's, well, let me just tell you, how many mega seasoned guys are doing bandit signs underneath stop signs? I'm just asking you. Do you know any?
Yeah, I love you saying that. Yes. No,
okay.
No.
So that's not.
I know a couple of guys that are doing. Now I will say I know a couple of guys that are doing big business that are still doing bandit signs, but I'm not a bandit sign guy for many reasons.
Right. So long story short, if you're really trying to scale your business, you're going to have to essentially go create a marketplace with defined customers, and those customers, every time you get to make an offer, you work them up to the point where you think it's worth making an offer on, and they think it's worth listening to. That offer is going to cost you between $100 and $150. That's what all the guys tell me that are real guys doing it as a significant business.
Right.
Well, let me tell you something. If you burn 100, let's just split it, $125 times 19. leads that you didn't convert, that's a lot of money to throw in the trash.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of money to throw in the trash. And the deal is, it's like, I've had wholesalers ask me, well, if I'm going to buy on terms, they're not willing to do this. And I'm like, no, they are willing to do it.
Right.
The skill set is the talk off of the offer. But before you ever get to the offer, you got to know what you're offering, right? And what can be done that they couldn't have any perception of what's doable.
Because negotiations are one up here.
Yeah.
Negotiations are one up here. The negotiation is knowing what you can ask and how to ask it, more importantly. Here's one of the things I always teach people when we're talking negotiations, because anybody that's watched me for any period of time knows that negotiations are very near and dear to my heart. Because here's the thing, would you rather have your phone ring 100 times and you get 5 closings, or would you rather have your phone ring 20 times and you get 20 closings? The difference is negotiating, right? To understand that, the way that I remind people of that is, when does the negotiation start for you? When does your negotiation start? Say you're a real estate investor, and from that process you're starting to talk to your seller. When does the negotiation start for you?
Well, the first thing you have to do to negotiate is understand what the other party needs, right? And then you match their needs to your offer.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And
So-
that's why all those open-ended questions are so important.
Yeah.
That's why I say our negotiation starts at hello. As the seller or as the investor, our negotiation starts at hello. The seller's negotiation starts when you rustle the papers at the dining room table.
Exactly.
And you start talking about terms.
So here's a classic deal, and I'll try not to get too complex,
Sure.
but I'm going to take a swing at this.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to go to the whiteboard. So here's a classic deal that I think a lot of wholesalers don't really think about. Most wholesalers say, I would love to be able to collect long-term payments, either in rent or a wrap note, right? If I could make some money up front, right? And the first thing you have to embrace is that the seller is willing to carry terms that you can't wrap your mind around unless you've seen it.
Yeah.
Right? We price about 3,000 one-off notes a year, and we separate those notes into notes from guys like you and notes that are just coming mom and pop. So let's just talk about the mom and pop book of
Segment.
business
Yeah.
for a minute,
Okay.
right? Average interest rate is around 4%.
That's awesome.
The average down payment, 1/3 of every seller finance note we see is $0 to $5,000 down. Okay? So these sellers don't require a huge down payment.
And I love that, again, getting reinforced by somebody in the industry, because those of you who have heard me teach on talking in terms, I say start. If you we're going to start and we're going to negotiate down on our interest rate. And I've got a little bit of a different way to negotiate on terms than he does, and he'll get into that. But we start at 4 or 4.5% to our seller, and we start with 0 down, right?
Yeah.
So that aligns perfectly with what you're saying.
So find out what your seller's pain is. So let's just say, so most people say, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around, Eddie, if the house wholesale is only worth 78 or 80 and retail is 100, okay? How can I make a $100,000 offer? Right? That's like, that doesn't make sense to me, because I'm thinking buy low, sell high. So here's the idea, okay? You can pay any price if you let the price you're paying be paid out over time, because you're paying today's price, but how are you paying it? With tomorrow's dollars. And if those tomorrow's dollars are no interest or low interest, or that you defer your first payment to 2 years from now and own and own and own, the closing statement still says $100,000. They got $100,000 in their mind.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, the bargain is how you're paying it back.
I love that you
Right.
put that. That's a huge nugget of information there. And you've heard Daniel Moore talk about that before too, of we can buy at any price. We can buy at any price. It's how you structure that deal that makes it worth something, because tomorrow's money is worth less than today's money.
So what if they want 20% down at the closing? And you said, I don't want to pay 20% down. So then I'm gonna whiteboard this a little bit. So then you structure a $100,000 offer, okay? But the $100,000 offer is broken into 2 parts. You have a first lien for $20,000, and it's carried at, 8% interest. And the payment, I'm going to say 4 years, and I don't know what the payment is.
It can only be on the lined part.
Okay, sorry
That
about
gray
that.
part doesn't work.
Let me scoot over here a little bit, and I'll clean my work up here.
I wish it did go full width though. That'd be better.
Payment, and the term would say 4 years. And I'm going to say the payment, I'm guessing, but the payment's probably going to be $650.
Okay.
We'll
throw
throw a
it.
dart at that.
Okay.
Okay, 4 years. Now, the reason I wrote that loan at 8% is because I want to find somebody with a self-directed retirement account and sell that note at full amount, no discount.
Full par.
They're buying a 20% loan-to-value loan, and I'm going to sell that loan at the closing.
Mm-hmm.
You remember, all these real estate investors that I showed this formula how to make the notes, what was their whole magic? That they could then sell that note at the closing.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to sell that note at the closing, and then I'm going to do a longer-term note for $80,000, and let's just say they won't stand still for 0%.
Okay.
Maybe they'll stand still for 2% interest. 20 years, boom, monthly payment's going to be cheap, and you can plug those numbers in. We'll write them.
405.
405 on the last note.
Yep.
And what about the first one?
What was it? 20,000.
20,000, 8% on 4 years.
8, and that would be a payment of 488.
All right. Now I can owner finance this note and start collecting a payment of about $800 a month. Correct? You know this because
Oh, yeah.
you've done this
Oh, yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of
Oh, yeah.
times. Okay? So if I could sell that, if I could resell this house at 15 or 20% down, and I paid nothing down, don't I make a flip fee up front? Plus, don't I make the difference between these payments and a $700 or $800 payment for the next 25 years? See, that's making money today and having a portfolio that produces income in the future.
Well, and one of the beautiful things about that too is that we're making cash flow up front, but what happens in 4 years when that 20 grand is gone?
Yeah.
Your cash flow bumps up another $488.
All right, so let me clean this up a little bit. So,
And guys, as we're doing this, if you have questions, please chime in, put the questions. We'll be getting into the questions right after our next break because we do want to handle anything that you guys have, and we're getting into some really cool, really innovative stuff that you're not going to learn from anybody else. So take this opportunity to really chime in. Let's make this a two-way street.
all right, so first portion is 4 years, and my payment is $488. The second portion is 240 months, 20 years, right? Note people talk in terms of months. Right, we don't talk in terms of years, we talk in terms of months. 240 months, 48 months, whatever it is. So 405 is the payment there, okay? And that's what I owe. And that first lien is sold, and so to get $20,000 at the closing, the negotiation is they have to forego not collecting payments immediately. Now they're saying, I don't want to do that. A salesman's job is to deliver bad news.
That's a great nugget phrase there too. A salesman's job is to deliver bad news.
And the art of this deal is to say, okay, do you want this price or do you want cash at a discount?
Yep.
You decide which one you want. You can start collecting payments immediately or you can get cash today. Which one is the most important to you? And I will tell you that this gives you a solution to do 100% financing that most people pass.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So then how am I going to resell it? I'm going to resell it with a significant down payment and a higher interest rate. And that higher interest rate means that instead of me collecting $488 a month, I'm going to be collecting $700 or $800 a month. And then all of a sudden, plus I made the money at the closing. And this shows a guy that takes a deal that was a trash can deal.
Yep.
He wakes up and figures out this is the best thing he owns.
Right.
Right? It's not the flip money.
Oh, yeah.
It's the flip money plus payments for the
Well,
next
because with
25
a flip
years.
of a $100,000 house, you flip that deal or you wholesale that deal, you're making $5,000, $10,000 net, period. Right? That's all you're going to be getting from it. Well, we're netting that from our down payment when we sell it with owner financing. And I'll tell you right now, if you sell a $100,000 house, $10,000 down payment, you sell it at 9.5% on 30 years, that's a $756 payment a month. So you're making $350 a month, and you got the same net up front that you would have before.
And here's the other thing. I'm 59 years old. Okay, I have had.
Don't look a day over 58.
I have had big lines of credit.
Yeah.
Tens of millions. Okay, I'm 59, but all with those lines of credit, guess what comes with it? A personal guarantee.
Yeah, I was about to say your own blood.
Okay, and let me tell you something. This 59-year-old guy ain't gonna do that no more. These people that owner finance you, you're not gonna have to qualify. Okay, because they're not even. Trust me. They're not even going to think to qualify.
I've literally never had a seller, and part of my contracting with my sellers is disclosing to them that they have the right to look at my financials. Never once have I had anybody.
They don't
require
need to
that.
look at my financials because Eddie ain't going to personally guarantee it.
Yeah,
my financials would do them no good because Eddie ain't going to personally guarantee it. I'm going to buy it probably in a trust or some entity, and so. The truth be told is they're not going to want to qualify me, and I'm not going to want them to qualify me. So it's going to take no paperwork. It's not going to have a personal guarantee. And that in a low interest rate in term are 4 terms, only 4 of 50 that you can negotiate.
Awesome.
Right? So
awesome.
all of this moving the property around down there, and people, and so somebody listening today goes, oh my God, this is giving me a headache. I don't know what getting rich is worth. This will get you rich. Flipping houses won't get you rich.
Flipping houses is a job. Wholesale
This
is a
will
job.
get you rich.
Yeah, I love
And
it.
so I don't know what getting rich is worth, but if it took somebody 150 hours to learn this, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so we're gonna take a break. Give you guys a second to think about what we've just talked about, because you've just learned something very cool. And again, just to point out here, something that is not normal, that you do not probably have in your arsenal already, is something I want to point out here. He deferred the majority portion of that deal until that down payment was paid off, right? He didn't pay the $20,000 at 8 and the $80,000 at 2 at the same time. He said, look, you want $20,000 now, I'll give it to you now. But that means that you don't get to accept the $80,000 for a few years after that. But then through negotiation, through letting them know how much, one of my big factors, one of the big things I'll tell you right now, if we're going to sell that to somebody, if we're going to sell that to a seller, $80,000 at 2% for, what did we say, 20 years?
Yeah.
When I'm telling them that, I'm telling them, look, overall, that's giving you $97,000 total, not just 80, right? You're making another $17,000 just, so there's all kinds of ways that you can get into that. Very cool strategy to learn here. But yeah, think about that. We're gonna go on a break real quick, and when we get back, we're gonna kind of finish up about a little bit on just how does that note sale work on the actual selling of the note. We're gonna spend a brief amount of time on there, and then we're gonna really hammer into questions. So make sure that you get your questions in, both YouTube viewers and Facebook viewers, and even if you're watching on the replay, please ask a question. We'll sift back through these things as time goes on. We like to make sure that that's going, that your questions are being answered. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
Awesome.
Welcome back, guys. We're having a great time here with Mr. Eddie Speed, one of the biggest beasts in the industry. Guys, if you like what you're seeing here, don't forget to like the page, the Propelio page, like and subscribe, turn on the notifications. We also, both Eddie and myself do education on this type of stuff. So if you like the way that you're hearing these things presented, please look into us. CreativeCashFlow.com is going to be where you'll find me, where I'm teaching you about seller financing, wraparound mortgages, subject to, all of these kinds of front-end strategies. Eddie has his own education here on NoteSpace. How can people get a hold of you or look into you, Eddie?
Note School.
Note School.
Yep.
What is that? NoteSchool.com?
NoteSchool.com. Yep.
Excellent.
And then obviously on Facebook, it's The Note School.
The Note School. So make sure that you're checking into Eddie, because again, there's nobody better to listen to and learn from than somebody who's done, the just tremendous numbers that he's done over time. So before the break, we talked about some really cool ways to structure deals, ways to get into deals, right? And Eddie is giving us, in in respect to the viewership that we have of typically being people who are buying directly from the seller, Eddie has just given us some great ideas on how to make some really saleable secondary market paper, right?
Yep.
Now, once we create that paper, how does that turn around and become a saleable note? How does somebody sell that note, one? And then two, let's say that somebody wants to kind of skip through that
Yep.
front end,
Yep.
and they just want to come and they want to say, look, Grant's really good at that front end. I just
Yep.
want to buy the note from him on the back.
Exactly.
Can you explain how people would make money on both of those ways?
Yeah, so you think in terms of you have active note people and passive note people.
Okay.
Right? An active note person would be you or I. We're out there finding a deal and structuring it and doing all this kind of stuff. And on the other side, it's you find somebody that's just there. The stock market's not letting them sleep at night. Okay, and they think, man, if I could earn 6-8% return, that'd be awesome. Particularly secured by real estate. I don't want to go figure all this out. I just want to go have a note and be the bank, so to speak, and collect payments every month and have it serviced, and the servicer do all the work, and just boom, they just wire the money. A lot of people do it in their self-directed retirement accounts. A lot of people do it with money they're taking out of the stock market.
Let me ask you this: do you have to have your? Because to me, being a guy, and I don't know how much of my story you know, but I grew up in a 1,000-square-foot house in Garland with gang signs tagged on it. I didn't have money getting into this business. So when I got into this business, I had to. That's what got me into Subject 2 and creative financing. I had no money to spend on that.
Yeah.
If you're going to be in the note space, don't you kind of have to have your own money to buy these notes? Rather than kind of leveraging things out and getting those lines going.
You have to start out being active. You grew up in a 1,000-square-foot house in Garland, and I started in the note business in a 10-by-40 mobile home.
There you go.
Okay, so you and I didn't start out with a big pile of money, so we had to go be active and do strategies that let us work ourselves into owning notes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't start there. But if you're a busy executive and you make $250,000 a year and you're working 70 hours a week in your day job, you may say, hey, I can't be that guy, Eddie.
Right.
I get being active. That's cool what you do, but I can't do it. So then there's a passive herd of people out there that can just go invest in notes that the other active people are sort of facilitating
The yin yang
and bringing over.
of real estate. I
And
always
it's-
talk about you find somebody that can complement what you have. If you have the ability to be active, you can find those people that don't, but they have the capital.
Here's the thing about being active, right? So we've discussed 2 different strategies with notes today. We discussed kind of the real estate investor model and creating notes that can be sold in the secondary market, okay? And then we talked about buying a property with seller financing and getting the seller to agree to things that a bank or a hard money lender wouldn't agree to. You're right, the talk off,
Right.
and getting them to do things that we know they'll do it,
Right.
if you just say it in the right way, right? And then we talked about like changing your conversion rate. But one of them you're the borrower, and the other one you're the lender. Then you're creating a really high quality note that can be sold into the secondary market to passive investors or banks or whatever that source is, which exist.
Right.
And then the whole monster is this: is this difficult, right? Is this difficult? And I would say to you that to me, it's no more difficult than understanding doing a fix and flip.
Right.
Because when you walk into a house, it's got to be fixed up. You got to go figure out what it's going to cost to do this, and what if you tear the wall back and there's this, right?
Right.
And people, that doesn't seem to scare people, right? They know they got to go figure it out.
Because they can watch HGTV and
Right.
have them.
and the note strategies to me are just that simple, but it's a mindset, and it does change forevermore how you look at a real estate deal, because you're not just looking at buy low, sell high.
Right. And so if somebody has a note that they want to sell, I would love to tell you, just send it to me and I'll make money off of it. But instead, you can go directly to the source of somebody who's going to be buying these notes.
Yeah.
How could they, so like say we've got somebody in the audience watching and they've got some notes that they want to sell to you.
We
what would they do?
own an acquisition company called Colonial Funding
Okay.
Group. And as I said, we price about 3,000 seller finance notes a year. We've got an executive team with a heck of a lot of experience, about $3.5 billion worth
Yeah.
of buying seller finance notes. And you can reach out to us, and we're happy to go price those notes.
And if you are one of the folks that is watching this at work today, right? You're at the office, you got a lunch break coming up, and you just don't have the time to be active, please reach out, comment. You can message me on Facebook, you can message Eddie, whatever that is. We have ways to place that capital. We are active in this business. We can always make your money work for you in a fashion that's secured by real estate, not secured by the, we saw what the stock market did last month. I mean, stock market can be great to you, but it can be terrible to you too, right? So having it secured and a tangible asset is huge. Yeah. Let's kind of go over to some questions. Let's hit some questions. If you guys have some questions that you are looking to get answered, again, this is a prime opportunity. You're talking to somebody that's done a ton in the industry. Frankly, with both of us, let's hammer through that a little bit and see what we can get going for you. And then when we finish up here, we do want to talk to you guys about how you can get involved politically to make sure that the right to do a business this way, ethically, and again, the right way, still making money for us, is not attacked and taken away from us. There's a lot of groups that, for instance, and this is not a knock on the National Association of Realtors, but if it was up to the National Association of Realtors, there would not be a single transaction that ever happened without a realtor involved in it, and that, we all know, does not make an ethical transaction, right? Yeah. So we want to be involved. We want to make sure that people are being held accountable, but that things aren't getting taken too far. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Tang, damn integrators, they're always holding me back from going all in.
I know, they drive me crazy, but I gotta have them.
I know, as a visionary, there's nothing more important, man. If you are a visionary, you have to find your integrator. You will not find success in this business as a visionary, big success, scalable success, unless you have a good integrator on your side. Sonia, I do like the way that Eddie explains things. Me too, man. Thank you for taking the time to really, it's almost like you've done this before, haven't you?
Thank you, I appreciate it. I've worked hard at that.
Tracy Ann pointing out 4% is the average for mom and pop, and again, I think that is a huge golden nugget for us to take away from this, because as somebody who's pricing 3,000 notes a year, that's the kind of information that we as buyers need to see. Another thing that I'll point out that you kind of, in practice kind of grazed past, but guys, 6 to 8% is the private money rate, right? Now, that's not to say that when you've never done a deal before, you're going to go out and find an investor who's going to give you 6 to 8%. That's not going to happen. You do have to start off a little bit more, because what is interest? Interest is a reflection of risk, right? Yeah. But if you've got a little, got some stuff under your belt, you can double what people are making in the stock market average. Because do you know what the 10-year average is in the stock market? Any 10-year?
2%.
Yeah, it's like 2. On good years, it's 4, 4.5.
Yeah,
so good decades, I should say.
So here's the thing about it. When you learn the note space, you're going to learn that it's you can grade a note. There's A grade notes, there's B grade notes, and so forth and so on, right? Mm-hmm. So an A grade note, the appropriate yield for a passive investor is 6 or 8%. Another investor that has a different degree of tolerance and sophistication, they might buy a loan that doesn't grade out quite as well, and we buy these all the time. Mm-hmm. They have a higher yield, but it might take more sophistication if something doesn't go right. Not that you don't want it to go right.
Right, of course, of course. But that is, that's a good point to bring up too, when we're talking about this note space. One of the things I always talk, because the fear that people have is that you're fearful of the non-payment, fearful of the foreclosure. And guys, I'm here to tell you right now, we don't want a foreclosure to happen. We want to do everything we can to avoid that by properly taking the down payments, getting skin in the game, properly underwriting, all that kind of stuff. But if you have to foreclose on somebody and get that property back, you are going to make a ton more money on that asset. So your worst case scenario is not the worst.
Well, and once again, this is where you and I believe that there's a responsible way to do the business. And we're not wishing bad on anyone. And that's why it's important to have qualifications and to run the credit, to make sure they have a track record of paying others back. And when you do that, then all of a sudden, my dad used to say, the harder you work, the luckier you get. Yeah. Well, then you get to be a lucky lender because you did the right work.
Yep. Jeremiah points out Ryan should sit between us on the ground just to get in the show. I agree. I actually didn't think about it until right before we're starting the show. I'm like, wait, there's only 2 chairs up here. Where's the? We'll get Ryan in next time. Everyone learns different. I have to be walked through things to make it happen. But once I learn, watch out. Don, yeah, I think that's a sentiment that I think a lot of people should share if they don't already. I love, because what that sentiment tells me, right, is that he's willing to face a hard problem, willing to humble himself and listen, and once he listens and learns, can become that much more dangerous. And that's what we all need to be in. I'll tell you, you know, I was raised in this industry by, you know, somebody who couldn't really learn anything from anybody because they'd been there and done it all, right? And that was something that I had to learn to shift away from, because you can always learn something from somebody. Even people who've done far less than you can learn from. So Sonia had a question, who do you sell it to, right? Who do you sell that note to?
So, Sonia, the first thing is you have to understand how big the market is for secondary loans, right? Self-directed retirement accounts, right? The Quest guys, Equity Trust, all of those self-directed retirement account companies. The typical self-directed retirement account company, of all the money they have under administration, between 20 and 35% of every self-directed retirement account they have, 20 to 30% of that money is sitting in cash, uninvested funds. They are dying for a good deal.
Huge nugget there. That is something for us to really pay, because all of my private money, with the exception of one loan, that was a guy that had $1 million in cash and was ashamed to tell me that because he knew how bad that was. All of my private money has come from people's self-directed IRAs. It's a great investment model. It's a great way to put that out, and to know that there's that much cash sitting there out there is huge.
And then on the real estate investor side, you know, if you're creating these larger notes, not the $20,000 note, but you're creating larger notes and you want to sell those notes, then yes, there's institutional investors. We're one of many. I'm not saying we're the only one, but there's institutional investors like us that are experienced in buying seller finance notes. The more regimented the note is written under, the more saleable it is, and for the most money, right? It's all that Grant and I have been talking about. So yes, there's tons of secondary markets for notes.
Matt pops in, where do you find the note? If you want to be a note buyer, where do you find that note?
Well, I don't know that, Matt, I'm not trying to avoid your question. Obviously, we bought a lot of notes. There are websites that you can go to and buy notes. And we own a website where you can buy notes called notesdirect.com. And I'm not saying we have everything, but we...
Right, so plug. But
Yeah.
that's good. That's what they need to know.
You can do direct mail, and you can do internet marketing to find notes. You can have a network of real estate investors that bring you notes. All of those different scenarios are going to bring you a supply of notes.
Right. I think one of the main points on any of our industries, or I'm sorry, strategies, is networking. Right. Networking. Finding those people. Propelio has a huge event coming up. What's the date on that? February 12th is going to be the next Propelio live event. I'm going to be there. I have notes. If you want to buy notes, you can contact me. There's going to be people there who have been learning from Grant Teach Me Somethings how to do these notes, who will have created these notes that you can buy, right? Sohail asks, do you service the notes?
We actually have all of our loans third-party serviced.
Okay.
We serviced them for years. We just feel like we can be more compliant and more scalable if we hire a third-party servicer.
Are you willing to share who you service through?
Yeah, we use National Asset Management there in Columbia, South Carolina. We use SN Servicing.
Okay.
Used to be called Security National. We use a company in Spokane, Washington called Allied, and then also I use a company called FCI Loan Exchange.
Excellent information.
On this next one, I've already said that they may want to reach out to a home investors franchisee or corporate, but still would like to get Eddie's perspective.
Sure. So this is from Brian, and Ryan was just saying he's already reached out and given a little bit of an answer, but just getting some input. Knowing that you are familiar with the We Buy Ugly Houses franchise, which is Homevestors, do you know the specifics on policies for the company to add note buying to their tool belt? Any local company may find it confusing to add if they have commission-only team members.
Yeah, Brian, my history with Homevestors was many years ago. I do know the guys over there now. We're friendly, but I don't have any current relationship with them, and I just can't say what their policy is on that.
Anton, this is a great question that to be the buyer, I'm assuming the seller has to have the house paid off, right? 100% owner financing? Absolutely not right, actually. That is one of the coolest things, the strategies that we have. You heard me mention briefly Subject 2 earlier. Subject 2 is the art of buying a house subject to the underlying mortgage staying in place as is. That's where Subject 2 comes from. You'll see it abbreviated Sub 2, the number 2, or Subject 2. Actually, I would really recommend that you go back through these Grant Teach Me Somethings. I teach you all about that stuff, and then go to propelio.com/academy. It's free to get in, and I have a full-blown 36 video series on Sub 2, owner financing, wraparound mortgages. That is how, like, I bought my first 50 houses literally with $0 out of my back pocket, and with Subject 2, from buying low equity deals, like you were kind of talking about earlier, buying it too high, right? How to buy high and sell low and still make money on it. And there's a full series. I mean, you got like 20-something hours worth of education on, and it is not rah-rah. It is full-blown, this is how it gets done information. So check that out. And you guys, you may even have some more. There's going to be, I say you may, there's going to be a lot more on that Propelio Academy launching this year, so it would be wise for you to get into there. Don Crosby, came in too late. Explain integrators. That's a great question. All right, so me and Eddie are visionaries.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna speak for myself when I say this. I suck at doing things a lot of times. I'm just gonna be very honest.
Yep.
I'm really smart, and I can put plans in place, and I can solve problems. Doing stuff, I suck at. And I'm speaking for myself there. But a lot of visionaries are kind of in that same way. We can see what is supposed to happen. We can see, but don't ask us to be in the weeds. Yeah. Don't ask us to be the one that every day has to log in and find this lead and send this thing and do that thing. The integrator is the person who beats the drum. The integrator is the person who can, if you tell an integrator, hey, every day at 10 a.m. I need you to log in and I need you to do this thing, and they have no problem with it, that's an integrator type. The integrator is the person who's gonna listen to the ideas, because Eddie and I are gonna have 20 ideas a week. 5 to 10 of them are going to be good. The integrator is going to pick out the good ones and make sure that those things happen.
And then not listen ever again.
And yeah, do you feel like I kind of put that out there? Well,
Steve Jobs was a visionary.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Steve Wozniak was the integrator.
Exactly.
Walt Disney was a visionary. What's his brother's name? Do you remember his brother's name?
I don't.
Mr. Disney. Walt Disney. We all know Walt Disney. Yeah. We all know Eddie Speed. We all know Grant Kemp. The reason Walt Disney is famous is actually Walt Disney's brother, who was the integrator, who knew the business. We all know Henry Ford. Henry Ford was a visionary. He had an integrator whose name I can't remember, which is specifically the point of integrators, who was the one who actually turned this into a business. Every successful business has a visionary and an integrator. You know the visionary because they're the one that's in front of you on camera. You don't know the integrator because they're the one that's behind the computer actually getting stuff done. Yeah. Not to say that we can't get stuff done, but, you know, me it is. Brady, the paperwork to buy and sell liens is stupid, easy, and cheap. The due diligence process to buy a lien is very cerebral, no physical work required unless you take the property back and become a rehabber. How do you feel about that comment there?
I know Brady, and I agree with that. You know, I mean, it's easy when you understand it. You do need to understand it.
Yeah.
Right? Due diligence is a great thing to do. You know, the old saying about making a loan. You know the time to worry about a loan?
When's that?
Is before you make it.
Yeah, that's what I would have said. But
right.
I don't want
the time to worry about buying a loan is before you buy it.
Yep.
Right. So you do need the due diligence. I agree with you, Brady. It's easy for you now because you're at that process. But if somebody's not there, we're not. You know, Grant and I are not saying, "Oh, you don't even worry about this." It's just
absolutely not.
It's just all going to be common sense. Common sense to us is common because we have a common thought process, and it just leads to a logical conclusion.
Roy Disney, thank you, Jeremiah. Roy Disney was Walt Disney's brother.
All right.
Do we have any more questions that we want to hammer into?
Maybe one.
We got maybe one question. All right, so we're going to hammer one more question here, and then we will finish up with giving you guys some ways to get involved and make sure that this is an industry that we're going to be able to do for a long time to come. Oh, I love this. Jamie's going to make you, or Jaime's going to make you very happy, because I know that this is something that's very near and dear to Eddie's heart as well. Early payoffs are another way to get another 10% plus extra yield. Do y'all ever press for early payoffs? That is an excellent point. And we could go on forever and ever about this, but talk about that a little bit, because I know this is something that you do.
Yeah, so our whole book of business is built on the fact that when we buy a loan at a discount, we know we're going to get paid off early. Accelerating an early payoff, we probably are at a point right now where we don't really push that. You know, I've had tens of thousands of notes. You know, I've sent them to credit repair. I've sent loan originators to go work it and stuff. I've just learned that honestly they pay off early. And to go get somebody off the couch and go do a refi when they really don't want to go do a refi hasn't really worked for us. It's theoretical, but it's not been practical. But the average 30-year note pays off, seller finance note pays off in about 6 years.
Excellent. Good to know.
The deal after the deal. When you're buying a property.
That's where I was, yeah.
When you're buying a property and they're seller financing you, how you structure those terms in the agreement, the terms sheet, a commercial lender would call it, you need to make sure you latch up a real tight first right of refusal to buy that loan. Because the odds are when they're collecting that loan at 2% interest over 20 years, they're going to become impatient and they're going to early payoff. And the odds are not 100%, but darn near it, that you'll be able to buy your own loan at a discount in the future.
So in other words, a way to think about that is that if you buy your property, like we talked about here, right? You got a $20,000 loan, and let's say that you didn't sell that loan at the closing table. You were just going to pay the 8% to your seller over that first 4 years. Well, don't you think that you might be able to get to them in 2 years and say, hey, we still owe you 15, but I'll give you 10 right now if you'll just call it even?
Yeah.
Lots
and
of
people
times
say, well, where
yes
would
to
I
that.
come up with the money? And let me just tell you something, there's a zillion ways that we can show somebody how to raise that capital to make that happen. So it's not like you're sweating, oh, well, I don't have that money in my checking account. The opportunity came along, I couldn't act on it. You could.
Yeah. Juan, thank you so much. He said this was a great one. His mind has been blown. That is our goal here. If your mind is blown, maybe you're watching the replay or something like that, please comment with a time for what's it called? Like the time in which your mind was blown. I would like to know what are the topics that you're most interested in as we talk about this, because we want to feed you what you want most, right? Like one of the things that I have to harp on is that you guys are the hero here. It's all about you. We want to make sure that you're getting to the position that you want to be in your career. That's the only reason why we're sitting up here and giving all this real information away for free. So, you know, make sure that if you like something, let us know what that is. And in return, if you like how we're teaching things, please check us out. Again, CreativeCashFlow.com is where I do things. CreativeCashFlow.com has an online academy with a bunch of videos to teach you how to do stuff, and I do a live Q&A session every Monday night for all my students where you can log in at 7 p.m. Central, and I just hammer through all your questions and get you answered and getting you where you want to go. I also do personal mentoring. I actually have one slot open right now that's open this week, so if you guys have been thinking about doing personal mentorship, please check me out, CreativeCashFlow.com. If you like the terms of what we're talking about, reach out to me. Now's the time. I only accept students in 3 or 4 times a year, so now would be the time to do that. Similarly, Eddie is a brilliant individual who also does education on this note space. So we've talked about a lot of really cool stuff here, but by no means is what you've learned today going to be enough to let you go be successful in the note space. So again, if you could tell us where people can learn more from you.
Just our website is noteschool.com, and we've got some great free stuff. We have webinars on a regular basis. We do a lot of stuff also on Facebook.
Annually, you do the biggest Note Expo I know of.
Note Expo. I mean, we teach thousands of students in a year nationwide.
Yep. Real stuff.
Yep.
Similarly, none of this would be possible without Propelio. Propelio.com is a phenomenal piece of software, and guys, I practice what I preach. Propelio is the CRM that my staff uses. It's got MLS comps. I have access to MLS. I don't even know what my password is to MLS anymore because I only get my comps through Propelio. The GUI there, the user interface is so superior. They also have leads for you. They also can host your websites. So there's just so much that Propelio does for a real estate investor to get you successful. So please check out Propelio. Sign up. They've got a free trial, but it's worth every single penny that goes into that full membership. I really recommend you looking into that. Like and subscribe here, Facebook, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. So as we close up, I do want to talk about how can you get involved, right? We talked about, like, Eddie had kind of pioneered a good underwriting package. Eddie kind of pioneered, hey, look, we're going to get a more saleable note on the back end on the secondary market if we do the right things. Well, then the government caught up and said, hey, maybe we should make it regulatory for people to do the right thing, and now it's regulatory. But like with anything, that pendulum can swing too far, right? And we've already seen them try to attack this industry in more than one way. And so fortunately, like here in Texas, we have guys like Eddie who've put together organizations, and Mitch Stephen, put together organizations like the Texas 100. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into the Texas 100 as well as the Seller Finance Coalition, because we do have a national audience?
So we clearly as an industry had to respond to the compliance, where we were in the law related to seller financing and what we needed changed. So there's two fronts. There's the state front of Texas, and there's the national front, which was in Washington, D.C. So the Seller Finance Coalition is a national effort to amend Dodd-Frank for limiting the restrictions in seller financing, okay? And at the state level, there are things, the legislation is in session right now. Let me tell you something, there are some things coming down the pike as an industry we have to respond to. Wrap notes, loan servicing, all of these things. I mean, it ain't like it might happen, it is going to happen. We feel like we have a seat at the table where we can sit down and talk with lawmakers and come up with a compromise that's going to fit for both sides. But all of this takes money. We have to have a lobby effort. We have to have people do things. So we formed a state association that half of the effort is for federal and half of it's for state, and it's called the Texas 100. So this is designed for bigger players. And a bigger player could be a guy doing 10 deals a year or 100 deals a year. And there's a commitment level for them, and then there's a smaller commitment level for somebody that's doing less than that. But obviously, we're just band together as an industry, and you've been very helpful in this as well. We band together as an industry and say we've got to work together, and we have to work with legislators. We have to work with agencies to make sure that we're doing things that is within the law, and and it's our job to make them see what our world looks like, and that seller financing provides home ownership for otherwise people that wouldn't have it.
Yeah, and I like how Matt Aycock put it when I was describing this to him, because Matt's getting involved too to help us out on this kind of stuff as well. He said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Yeah.
And we don't have to like that laws are changed through lobbyists, but we have to accept that laws are changed through lobbyists, and we have to be sitting at that table. And it is important. We do have to pay those guys to get this stuff done. So there is a right way to do it. And if we're not funding that, and if we're not putting ourselves in front of the legislators to let them know that we're not crazy people that are trying to do the wrong thing out there, the other side will vilify us, and we will look like the bad guy, because there are bad actors out there. There are people that need to get run out of this industry, and I think that we are all, as a community, those of you who are watching this show, those of you who are involved with Eddie or myself, are all doing a good job of changing this industry and making sure that ethics and doing the right thing, especially when it's not in our favor, is one of our big pushes. Not everybody shares that. We need to run those people out. That's not in the question. What we need to do is we have to fund this effort. You guys had a lot of you reach out to me because we had a dinner with the senator about a month ago, I guess, to again get this effort moving, get this effort to where they understand who we are and what we're doing. So if you want to get involved, which I highly recommend you do, please reach out to me through a message or reach out to Eddie. But go to Texas 100. It's texas100.org, right?
Yes.
Go to texas100.org. You can sign up there. All we're looking for is 100 people to put in $1,000 a year every year for the next 3 years. That's what we need right now, right? That's our big goal right now. That's not a lot, guys. We make a lot of money in this industry, and if you want to protect the ability to create a portfolio that's going to be lasting and be a legacy for you and your family, you have to invest not only in real estate, but in the right to do real estate. And this is that opportunity to do that. So we're very fortunate that we have some monsters to stand on the back of who have created abilities for us to be at the table. Because I know I'm not having a dinner with a senator if we don't have a guy who's done $3.5 billion worth of notes they're pushing this. If we don't have a Mitch Stephen, if we don't have these guys that have set this industry up for us to help us get forward in that. But we need your help. We need our help as a community to make sure that this stuff is going both nationally and locally. What's the it's is it sfc.org? Isn't that it?
SellerFinanceCoalition.org.
It's just
FFC.org.
sfc.org.
Yep.
Okay. So go to sfc.org if you're national. Go to Texas 100 if you're local.
Let's do one more question, just because Facebook loves to hide comments.
Okay.
And I found this one. It seems like it might be a good one.
All right, so we're going to close up with one more question because it was hidden because Facebook's algorithm is very interesting. So when negotiating with mom and pop to convince them to sell you the note, seller finance offer close to retail. So buy. We need some commas desperately. All right, let me start again. So when negotiating with mom and pop to convince them to sell you the note, seller financed offer close to retail. So buy high, then sell higher. So then you can come around.
Seller finance to
someone else instead of wholesaling the deal. I think I understand what's happening here, and I think it's basically saying, so when you're negotiating with mom and pop, it's okay to buy at full retail price because we're going to sell on terms that make sense. I think, is that what you're gathering from this?
Yeah. I use the expression dictate the terms.
Okay.
The skill in this business is how you dictate the terms. That's as simple as it gets. Mm-hmm. A real estate investor is going to someone that's going to wholesale them a house and convince them to sell a house at 25% less than what the market says it's worth. Well, that takes a talk off, right? Mm-hmm. Well, to convince someone to carry terms for you, it takes a talk off. And it's not difficult. It's just a process, and it's a process you have to hone your skill.
And this is one of the things that that on CreativeCashFlow.com, if our wonderful video editor can get me the videos for it, I will have a negotiation series that is ready to go that will teach you guys how to negotiate your way into that kind of stuff. Yeah. As a prime example, one of my very first students when I started teaching is a guy named Ronnie Walker, and he has become a beast in the industry. And one of the things I loved about him is he came into me with the contract signed. It was a crap contract. Everything was awful about it except he got it signed, and he fought for the deal, right? We had to go back and amend a lot of things, but he took action. Well, I trained him, I honed him, that kind of stuff. He eventually became a partner in my company. As a partner, he was still in this wholesaler mindset of the seller has to walk away with something. I'm in the mindset of that seller is walking away with not a foreclosure on their record. If it's somebody that's behind on payments, we're buying sub 2.
Yep.
We're giving them not a foreclosure. We're giving them not bankruptcy. So I don't pay money to these guys. They give us their house. And to the point of you dictate those terms, that was a real mental hurdle that he had to get over. Yeah. He felt like he had to give people at least $1,500 all the time, to the point that I heard, I would overhear him on a conversation at one point in time with his brother explaining what he was doing with me. And he's like, yeah, so we buy the house and, we'll give him like $1,500 and then take over on the mortgage. And I'm in the background, we get it for free. He's like, we don't give him the money. But once he put that through his brain, that this is how we buy, he never paid down payments again. We got all these houses with zero down, with favorable terms, low equity, but we made a ton of money on those deals. So it's a mental game. We dictate those terms, we understand what the possibilities are, and we have to understand that the only thing that matters at the end of the day is that two people agree on something.
Exactly. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is this. We get paid the most when we are creative. In this business, the ultimate paycheck is when we do something that is more creative than the next guy can think of. Mm-hmm.
I love it.
And you just want, and how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you learn creativity? One piece at a time.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Eddie, thank you so much. I mean, we've been really blessed to have you on the show today, and thank you for all the great information that you've shared with us today. It's just awesome. So if you guys are watching on the replay and you have a question, make sure to just tag us. Tag our name on there, because that's going to be the most helpful way for us to know that you have another question there. Don't forget to like and subscribe where you're watching. The Note School on Facebook, CreativeCashFlow.com, or CCF Mentors on Facebook. Like, share, subscribe. Follow us, all that kind of good stuff. We love having you guys here. We love working with you. This is a really, really cool pleasure for both of us to be involved in y'all's careers and see you become more successful. So thank you for being here. Don't forget that next week we will be right back here, same time, same place, Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. And we look forward to seeing y'all's successes using these creative strategies. Thank you so much, Eddie, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We will see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.